before we just get started in housekeeping, I want to say hello and thank you to the rest of my AALS team. I see Marianne, I see Jim, thank you to Clarissa, Colleen. All of us are new together, so I don't remember everybody, but thank you so much to everybody who helped put this together. I remember meeting Christine a couple months ago and asking her if she would do this, and it kind of brought me back to my days as coordinating the LCMC. So this is like my own mini LCMC, which I'm really excited about, with 1 star, and that's Christine. So I will go ahead and get us started. Again, my name is Liz Field. I'm getting my executive committee. Thank you, Marianne. You're doing this in real time for me. I am Liz Field. I am the communications director at GW Law, and I am the co-chair of the IA section for this year, along with Marianne, and our amazing committee, which I'm going to learn, remember everybody in just a second. But we're going to go ahead and get started because we're really excited to have somebody who is extremely important to us, whether or not you're on the communication side or the alumni development side. I think we can all agree that law.com is a place where we all go for information, no matter what our role is at our law school. And we all knew and loved Karen Sloan, and we are also happy to see her at Reuters. And we are also so thrilled that Christine Charnosky is our new go-to from law.com, and thrilled to have her here to meet so many people that she'll be working with over the course of her career at law.com, where she has been for 4 months. I'm going to allow her to jump in and introduce herself, and we're going to go ahead and get started with how we can best work with her. But again, please go ahead and put in any questions that you want me to make sure we post to her, or you can post to her as we get to that point. So Christine, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to law.com.
Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. It's really nice to see some familiar names on here and a lot of new ones. So I'm excited to make these connections today. So thank you, Liz. My first job out of high school was as a legal secretary, and that was back in the 80s, and it piqued my interest in law. I've always been like a junkie when it comes to law shows. From there, I went to college. I got a degree in psychology. I worked in that field for a few years and decided to go to grad school, and I actually considered for at least a moment, going to law school. I was also looking at possibly social work or writing. All of those were passions of mine. I ended up with the writing. I got an MFA in writing in the early mid-90s. And from there, I actually started teaching, college teaching, which I've done on and off for 20 years, usually freshman, English, public speaking. About 6 years into teaching is when I started my journalism career for a local paper. I'm in Massachusetts. And I was always told I'd be good at journalism because I do ask a lot of questions of people, so I annoy friends and probably sources sometimes. Then I kind of moved around. I went from Massachusetts to Pittsburgh to Philly and circled back to Mass about 7.5 years ago. And in doing so, was working in both journalism and teaching. Was at Penn State for about 5 years down in Philly, and Westfield State was my big go-to school up here. I was an editor of a paper called the Country Journal, which was a weekly newspaper, print paper covering 16 towns. I was laid off in 2018, the end of 2018, and I had sort of dashed my dreams about journalism at that point after 10 years in the field. I tried marketing, which I did not enjoy. No offense to anyone. And then the pandemic hit. And so I was applying to a ton of jobs, did a whole bunch of odd jobs over the past really year or two. Saw the ad for law.com probably around, I want to say early October. I thought it was, for one, a very well-written ad. So that in and of itself drew me to it. It was just very sophisticated, and I actually got contacted the same day I applied. I went through a whole bunch of series of interviews and testing, and it was late October, I think right before Halloween, that I got the offer. And it's really felt like my dream job, because I feel like I've come full circle with having the education background, having the journalism background, my interest in law, and it just being a step up from regular local journalism. So I am having a blast. I do work remotely. Again, I'm in Mass, not in Boston, I'm in Western Mass. So I'm Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, so that's what brought me here.
Well, we're excited to have you here. I know that many of the folks on the call you've already communicated with and met many of our deans and administrators. If we haven't had the opportunity to meet you yet, tell us how we can do so, and how do you feel about getting to know how do you wish to get to know our schools? How do you wish to get to know our deans? What's the best way to do that? I know we luckily had a sort of an informal meeting with you and Dean Matthew. I know you've done that with some other deans. What is your desire? Because there are 204 of us. So how do you wish to get to know us?
What I've been doing, the first strategy that my editor had me do was, because we are focusing on DEI a lot, is I contacted the 28 diverse women deans. I have connected with about 30% of those, including Dean Matthew. Which of course is how I met Liz, which is awesome. And what I have been doing with those is an informal, what I call meet and greet. It's off the record, unless we decide to put anything on the record. It often leads to stories, usually right away or down the road. I take notes so I can refer back to them. And so I've met, as I said, about 30% of the diverse women deans and about 30% of the T14s. I know there's sometimes a feeling that only the T14s will get press, and that's totally not to knock T14s, but I'm also looking at the non-T14s. And I've covered, I made a list of looking at, I've written more than 80 stories in the past 4 months, and 12 columns. And I've covered 32 schools in a variety of ways. A lot of times it is with diverse programs that they have, innovative programs. Maybe it's new deans getting reappointed. Sometimes, sadly, it's controversies at schools, like, of course, Amy Wax, Ila Shapiro. And so as far as pitching and contacting me, email is really usually the best. And my phone number is on there as well, so I just use my cell. And I would love to meet more deans. I want to connect with every school. So it can be meet and greets or just send me releases. I'm getting releases from some schools regularly, but I need that on a more consistent basis. Anything to do with legal ed, send my way. I'd rather you send it and say, well, we really can't cover that now, than miss it. Because there have been a few times where we just didn't know something was happening, like with, it was, now I'm forgetting which school, so I'm sorry, it was recent. I don't want to say the wrong school, but a school just recently got full approval from the ABA. And after I wrote a story, and I apologize that I'm not, why am I missing this? Let me just look real quick. Because now I feel bad if I don't name this book. What happened is it was announced, but the announcement didn't apparently go out to everyone correctly. So I actually got an email from someone at the school saying, how come you haven't covered this? And we sadly hadn't received it. And it had only been 2 days. So it wasn't, you know, a really long amount of time. Yes, North Texas at Dallas.
Thank you, Jim. It's Jim to put in the chat for us. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, because I had written about Jacksonville University launching a new school, and that's what was seen. And somebody wrote saying, hey, what about us? So, so we immediately got on that. I do always reply to emails. So, and when I taught, I used to tell students this too. If you contact me about anything, you don't hear back within, I would say in this case, 12 hours, I used to tell them about 24 hours, then I probably didn't get it. So that would be a good rule to go by. And particularly, my editor and I are very competitive and we like to break stories. So, so we definitely want to get the news and get it out there as soon as possible, particularly if it is something that's just happening.
That's really helpful, and it's great to know that we can pitch you via email. Most of us communicators are involved in sort of what you just mentioned. Shifting now to news stories around alumni and development, what kinds of stories are you interested in when it comes to alumni? Are you interested in big donations? Are you interested in innovative programs? If you could talk a little bit about what our alumni and development folks could share with us so that we could pitch that to you, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Donations is certainly one. They feel like a little run in the mill sometimes. So we will cover them, obviously, whenever we hear about them.
Is there a threshold that you're interested in when it comes to donations, or is there anything?
No,
a unique donor, a unique relationship?
There was one school, again, I'm not gonna, it was some months ago, so I'm not gonna root around for it, but I believe it was maybe $500,000. And I did contact the donor directly and talk to him. And I was impressed with that amount, you know. I'm impressed with any amount. So, so I'm easy when it comes to that. But anytime we get a donation, I haven't seen us not run one of those yet.
Okay.
Of course, my favorite, and some of you have heard me talk about this, is the Judge Judy, who gave the $5 million to New York Law School, since her daughter, she went there, obviously, her daughter went there, and her granddaughter's graduating this spring. So that was, as I told my editor, this was already my dream job, and now I got to interview Judge Judy. So she was awesome to interview. It was a blast. So yeah, so donations, anything to do with diversity, inclusion, equity, anything that's unique. So one of the stories that I did was Christina Rinnert, who was the first in the class of the first at University of Arizona who got in due to using the GRE. Mm-hmm. So as I was, that's been a big focus because the ABA Council just approved that in November. So about less than 2 weeks after I started. So I've been writing a lot about that. And as I talked to Dean Miller at University of Arizona, he suggested I interview Christina. She was fantastic. So I love those kind of stories. So it may be, you know, maybe it's a first generation story of someone, or it can be anything. And one of my other, I'll jump ahead to one of your other questions, because I think this can deal with alum as well, is the thing that I lack the most is being able to connect with students, whether present or past. So that's a really huge thing. I would say I've connected with a handful of them, mostly around the controversies like at Yale and Penn Law. So I would love input from students. It's trickier with DEI. They might not want to come forward. I mean, Christina Reinert, it was almost like stigmatized to have been at University of Arizona with getting in with a GRE. She was an older student. I want to say maybe early 50s when she was going there. And she didn't care. She didn't care about being outed, so to speak, about that. But if there are students who are just willing to talk really about anything, because I just am lacking that input.
That's really helpful. When we think about the stories that you wish to write, like about students, are you looking for practice ready? Are you looking for, is it sort of just anything? Because I want to protect your email. So giving us sort of instructions is really helpful when we think about what we're doing in our law school that may be special or unique. Is it new clinics? Is it field placement? Is it experiential learning? Is it alums who are doing amazing work right when they graduate, or is it everything? I think we want to be responsible and respectful to the kinds of stories you want to write. I think overall, we actually want to be helpful. And so giving us as specific instructions as you can will help us, because what we'll do is sort of go back and sort of look for those stories that you want and pitch them to you when we actually have them.
My inbox is really not that busy, so I loved everything you suggested. And there's been very few things that we haven't covered.
Okay.
I would say the things, so some of the things my editor chimed in on is, because I asked him his opinion on this, obviously, since I've been here 4 months, is his words were innovative programs, initiative, partnerships that schools are doing, donations, endowments, and significant personnel moves. So new deans, diversity directors. So I would say the least thing we do are like new professors, like that just doesn't sort of, like rank high enough. But it's significant personnel changes and really looking at those innovative programs. And I did do a column back in, I want to say January or February, where it was, I highlighted about 8 of the DEI programs that I had covered recently. Because I had a whole bunch that came up in like within 2 weeks. So what happens is, because I write the weekly column ahead of the curve that comes out on Monday nights, things will often get press again. So, and then, I mean, some of my more unique stories recently, and is the Harvard student who walked away from his summer associate position due to the ties to Russia with the New York City firm that he was going to work at. That is still getting page views on our, it was our top story for a few days out of all of global and ALM. So anything like that, or the student in Nebraska who got kicked out of the bar. So those unique stories, those personal stories, like are really attract readers as well as the other things. And I really would appreciate being able to, as I said, get the email and decide if we can cover it. And again, even if it's something like, no, it's often maybe not right now, but then something else happens and we end up covering it with something else, or I bring it up in my column. Because I am always having to come up with, what am I going to write my column about? And a lot of times it might be things that didn't make a full story, but I can get it into my column. So
that makes sense. Would you mind sharing with us who your editor is? I think a lot of folks on this call may be used to working with Lee Jones and some other folks there. Who is your editor at this time?
And my editor is Zach Needles.
Okay.
He's
That's
fantastic, very supportive. Can't say enough good about him. So and his sense of humor. We have similar sense of humor. So which is so important.
Yeah, that totally helps. Just going a little bit deeper into the story well, and again, folks on this call, please submit your questions. I do not want to be the only one, but I hope that I'm asking questions that are representative of all of our needs. We may or may not acknowledge that we have something happening next week, the elephant in the room for all of us with the U.S. News and World Report's rankings coming out. Tell us your philosophy on that. Do you care? Will you acknowledge it? Does it mean anything to you? I'd just be interested in knowing your philosophy and if that's something that you would even cover in your position.
Yeah, I don't want to also gloss over that we are having our go-to schools come out as well. So we bring those out. We've been doing sneak peeks for the past 2 weeks, and we are up to school 11. So Friday's release will be, so these been slideshows going from the top 50. So these are the top 50 law schools of feeder schools that are sending students to Big Law. And it's the percentage. So it's based on, I can't give anything away. So because the top 10 will be released Friday, but so it's somewhere between like almost 65%, and then down to, I think, 12% this year, which is a little higher than it was last year. And then the story I wrote yesterday will come out on Monday, which will include all the analysis, and then we'll be putting the charts out for the next week or so. But getting back to your question, yes, we do cover the U.S. News. In fact, in our rankings, we also put what the most recent U.S. News ranking was for comparison. I wrote a column, I want to say it was my one about data collecting, and I apologize, I have a little bit of a runny nose. I swear I took a COVID test the other day, and it's like my nose has been running ever since. It was negative, so so I want to before the rankings come out, U.S. News has been changing their methodology, and so I alluded to in this column that I'm going to be looking at that because there's a number of things that I want to look at. GRE is one of them. So yeah, so we will be kind of writing a story shortly right before that comes out. But yeah, our rankings don't always match theirs. I don't know. I can't really speak for ALM as whole. I'm not there long enough to really say what we think of them in general.
That's fair.
And this is my first year sort of encountering them coming out. I mean, I'm familiar with them. I've looked at them. We also have had some of our own. We've had some other studies. There was my second story, which actually got a huge amount of hits, was a report that was done. Was that the one that was, I think that was Grad Reports, did their rankings. And there was, I want to say Princeton Review also did something a few months ago. And they're all done a little differently, but definitely ranking stories get a lot of eyes on them.
That makes sense, for better or for worse, for all of us. When you think about the fact that you've written 80 stories in 4 months, which is quite a lot, this is sort of a two-parter question. What haven't you written yet that you're looking to write? And sort of what do you pay attention to in the landscape of legal education, particularly? So what are the trends that you're looking at, and what do you hope to write that you haven't yet written?
Okay, so I kind of forgetting the first part of your question.
Okay, I can ask you it. So what haven't you written? I mean, you've written 80 stories, and I imagine in that time you've only had the opportunity to really know a third of our deans, it sounds like. So it's a huge learning curve. Where else do you wish to write? Sort of what else is piquing your interest, and what kinds of stories do you see on the horizon for you?
Okay. So like I said, really wanting to connect with law students. So it's not just the law school, deans and administrators. I've written on virtual litigation a fair amount. In part, I revealed this in columns and in stories, and in a story a colleague wrote. So it's not like any secret, but I was assaulted right before the pandemic. So I experienced virtual litigation from a different angle. And so I have, that's just been an interest of mine. Of course, and I just wrote about that again in this past column, because of the last 2 weeks of my column, I've just been looking at the pandemic, and 2 weeks ago I was looking at the bar and how the pandemic affected that, and then just litigation. Of course, I work with looking at the ABA a lot, looking at decisions that they're coming out with. As I mentioned, the GRE is huge. Working with LSAC a lot, AALS, of course, and the National Conference of Bar Examiners. So those are some of the other sort of people that I work with a lot. One of the things I'd say is that I would like to gather from this as well are sources that could be. I want to increase my contact list of go-to sources. So if something happens, something breaks, it could be, one of the controversies, Eula Superior or Amy Wax, as far as this whole academic freedom. I have some people I go to, but we're trying not to rely on the same people all the time. Okay. And also things like ABA decisions that are made, things, like I said, with the GRE, things with the LSAC data. I just wrote a story Monday about that, as far as where the numbers are right now. Because of course, all the press which preceded me was the whole boom with the pandemic. And now this year, watching closely, where are these numbers? We aren't going back as low as 2 years ago. We're definitely lower than last year, but there's still, it's almost like in the middle, in between where it was 2 years ago and where it was a year ago. So even just getting sources to comment on things like that. What do you think this is about? Where do you think it's going? What are your admissions like? I did some stories the end of the year, as far as there was something like a 12% increase, I want to say, in students that were accepted to law school last year. So looking at how did schools accommodate that? How's the workforce going to accommodate that in a few years? And again, the DEI has been a big focus. So, so looking for collecting a list of whether people are in a law school or not, or just connected in the field in some way, being able to have that source list. So when something comes up, I can shoot you an email and say, hey, can I get comment about this?
Are there particular faculty members that you currently have relationships with? Are you looking to get more faculty members, sort of experts within your, quick dial? And if so, are you looking for a particular kind of experts that we can help you with?
Yeah, I would say anything with legal ed, anything that is in the realm of, like I said, the stories I've been writing, the 32 schools that I have written about so far, again, has ranged from donations to innovative programs to the, some of the controversies. And I guess it's even more the general stuff. So when I was writing the LSAC story on Monday, I reached out to Duke and I want to say University of, I think it was University of Illinois, replied. So they gave me their admission numbers. So that kind of thing. So I would love, I would say I would love more connections with professors, because that's, I would say I deal with deans most, and then professors or other administrators, and then students like the least. So the professors are kind of in between that, but I would definitely, anybody who's willing or able, because I know some schools, you might have to go through the comm department, like who's able to give me a comment depending what it's about.
Yes, I can definitely speak for the communications folks and let you know that we would be more than willing to try to connect you with one of our experts. But if you tell us, so for example, you're interested in finding someone who's, you know, your go-to in constitutional law, or a go-to in crim law, or something like that, I'm sure there are folks here that could easily put you in touch with those experts. Particularly, the beauty of our group is that we're really geographically diverse. And so if you're looking for somebody who has expertise in a state that, you know, that you may not have as much familiarity with in terms of the law, I think that this is a great group to tap, because we have representation from all across the United States. And I know that different states have different laws. And so this is a wonderful group to reach out to. And in fact, I can give you at the end of this call, if everyone, I'm sure it's fine to give everyone, you know, the RSVP list, that you can have all the folks who are on this call, and then follow up with them as necessary in case there's a particular interest in a school or a state issue that you're dealing with. Even if it's not related to our school, we still want to help you get what you need in order to write your stories.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, and of course I am covering schools from all over. Hawaii has been the furthest one. Probably, I guess Western New England has been the closest one to me, because they're about 20 minutes away. But obviously we do cover all the schools, all law schools in the US. So yeah, so it's great to know that's being represented here as well.
And sort of, you know, I just sort of alluded to it before, but sort of what do you, whether it's in legal education or not, sort of what do you pay attention to with respect to trends? What interests you in the news? What sort of, where do you find your inspiration? What are your favorite news outlets? Like, what do you look at in order to think about what you're going to write?
That's a good question. We get news from all over the place. So not to neglect, there is social media as well that comes in. That's how we got the Harvard story, was from LinkedIn. We do occasionally, maybe twice a month or once a month, we'll pull something from Reddit. So there's a story running today that someone posted the question, what's your biggest life lesson that you learned in law school, which of course has nothing to do with the school itself. So we might see stories in other sources, and then if we do, we want to find a new angle because it's already been covered. So again, we do like breaking if we see something that comes up. It is difficult. We do have trouble, I don't want to say, always finding out the news. Like I said, even from places where I thought, oh, I thought this school would send me this, and they, like I said, in the case with the with North I'm sorry, I don't want to get that name wrong because I was corrected.
North Texas.
Yeah, North Texas at Dallas. It has to be the whole name. But
you're speaking to your people here. Yeah.
I know. But so my desire is really to get those emails coming in more, because I feel like I don't get enough right now. And I'm trying to connect just even with the communications department at every law school, let alone the deans or faculty or student, like, because oftentimes they're going to be the gatekeeper. Yep. So being able to just, So UVA, for instance, I connected with them on a story recently, and I guess I don't always have to say what everything is, but I feel like I should. I think they had a new program. I want to say it was a new DEI program. But anyway, so he's sending me releases every day, and it's great. I'm not biting on all of them, but I can see what's going on.
Right.
Because it can be really challenging, because, and my editor, Zach, and I have talked about this, like, am I missing something? How do we stay on top of this so we're not missing anything?
That makes total sense. So you brought up social media. I know many of us follow you on social media. Do you follow us on social media? And if so, is that a way you see our news, or are you not really consuming us on Twitter? And by us, I mean like all of our schools. Is that something you don't consume on social media?
To be completely honest, I'm not a social media fan. It's probably most of us aren't, but kind of have to be. So I am not following as much as I should. I find Twitter to be quite inundating. And I feel like I don't know, there's this feeling when you're on social media, you feel like you're wasting time or doing something that's not work related, even if it is. I would say I'm on LinkedIn more, but I need to increase the connections there as well. So I am seeing more law school news. And I must have had to sign into Reddit for one of the stories. And my boss and I know we have this I have this love-hate relationship with Reddit and Twitter and all those. They are difficult to cut and paste into stories, and there's just logistical things. But would you suggest Twitter being the best platform?
Oh God, now you're asking me. I'm gonna go with a raise of hands or some sort of emoji. I mean, we definitely post. I can say for GW Law, we post on Twitter. The rest of the community, I think, is active on Twitter and other social media outlets. So I think you would get lots of stuff if you did consume on Twitter, whether or not it's the stuff I see lots of hands raised, and whether or not it's the stuff you want would be the question mark. But I believe that most of at least marketing communications folks are relatively active posting things on Twitter. News content. Now, I think that you've told us in no uncertain terms that we want to email you, and I think that your email box is now going to change if I were putting bets on it. So that may alleviate your need to follow via social media, but I would perhaps consider the idea of some of our deans are on social media. That might be another way for you to connect with some of the leadership work that they're doing. I don't know. I think that's another session we can talk about deans on social media, love it or hate it. But I think that could be an opportunity for you to learn more about our schools as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's great advice, and I will get on to that.
Yeah. Jim has told us, he is the authority on everything, that Twitter is the most active. So there you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I imagine that most of us, I know we do, at least our law school, we represent our law school in many instances, probably are following you already. And so hopefully it's an easy follow back for you, if that's something that, and maybe it's not too overwhelming, but something that could be helpful to you in addition to the now hundreds of emails that you're going to be getting every day.
I hope so. Should I, and again, I'm sorry, I'm just a bit of a social media dummy, but should I post my stories on Twitter? Would that be helpful? Or, I mean, I know we have the paywall, and I don't know how many people are paying us. I know a lot of times when I interview people, they do ask for a PDF, and if I've interviewed that person, my editor usually will say that's okay, but I always have to give the caveat that, you know, don't post it, like, you can post the link for people to go into,
Right, I know that.
but don't like spread the story around too much because it is paywall on there, which I hate, but it's, you know, so a lot of people, I've seen a lot of publications doing that more and more now. Even our local Mass Live has that.
Well, we all learned, if we were on the call with Dahlia Lithwick, that she thinks in 10 years there will be no free news. And so I'm going to say that you guys are ahead of the curve. I'm excited because I hope we have a couple questions. Catherine, do you have a question? Or, oh, you were just raising your hand to participate in social media. Okay, got it. Are there any other, if there is a question from anyone in the group, please either jump in or put it in the chat. I am happy to share the love here. So that is the social media piece. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I do have more questions for you. And I think, I don't know about all of us, but like, for example, we're not on Instagram. I imagine some schools are on Instagram, but I think Twitter is probably, could you, first 2 questions for you, Christine. Is it okay if I share your email address in the chat for everybody? And
Yes.
Could you share your Twitter handle? If you have one yet.
I do.
Or we can find it for you.
Let me see if I can get it on my iPad. I'm not even sure I'm signed up from the iPad. I think it's only on my desktop.
Right, so I'm going to share your email address right now with the group. Again, sorry to you. Now you have hundreds of daily emails. Oh, thank you, Wanda. Oh, Wanda found it for you. You're at CC Charnosky. You're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's something I should know, isn't it?
We're pretty fast over here.
I appreciate that.
We're
you now know my weaknesses.
we are definite sleuths here. What are you going to do about it? Okay, moving on to the next question. I don't know, you talked a little bit about some of the stories that you haven't told yet, but sort of want to tell, and you talked a little bit about students and innovative programs. A lot of our programs do now sort of have a DEI office, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and we have a dean or something like that. It's a very new kind of institution, a new place for many of us. Some of our schools are more seasoned and developed. What kinds of diversity, equity, and inclusion stories in particular are you looking for? And is it just that? Could you expand it to say LGBTQIA plus? Sort of, is there a box around those kinds of stories?
Yes, I love that question because I have done a lot of DEI and it has focused on, of course, ethnicity, which is, a big one, and first generation, which may or may not tie into ethnicity. But I've been just in the past month or so, and I've been asking people as I'm talking about the DEI, that the sorry, I'm really bad with this acronym, but the LGBTQA plus, I would love to write about that more, because it's a very, it's not being talked about, and it is definitely part of DEI. There was a Reddit thing that posted a few days ago about trans lawyers, and it was a student just saying, hey, anybody else trans, and how is that for you? I wanted to do it. My boss, I sent it, I think it just sort of got missed, because I run everything by him first, of course, being pretty new. But I would love to do more on that, because the thing that I don't want to say about I don't want to say anything's more or less important than the other. it's all inclusion, it's all equity. So it should all be being talked about. And the other part of that is anything to do with physical or learning disabilities or anything like that. That was a big thing that I dealt with in teaching. And I worked with the learning services programs departments in all my schools. I worked in the department for a bit. And I'm also, there was a dean, and again, I'm not going to try to dig through my notes to see which one. I believe she was on the West Coast, I know that. But I'd like to talk more about neurodiversity and how that is being handled in law schools, and how that's what this particular dean said is they basically, if they are part of a university, they use the university's department so that students can get accommodations. But so yes, these are more things I would like to include in my discussion of DEI, most definitely. And the other thing, because this GRE thing is new, I want to cover that more. And particularly, I wrote about this in a column, maybe 2 columns, as far as the CAS service, because so CAS is the Credential Assembly Service, of course, through the Law School Admission Council. And I did poll some law schools at the beginning of the year and asking, because some of the trickiness for me, and I'm having trouble finding people to comment on it too much, is that if you've taken the LSAT, it's going to be sent to a school. You don't have a choice about that. Even if you're trying to admit to a school with the GRE, unless you haven't taken the LSAT, it's going to be included. Now, the school said they want to see everything. If that's really true, that's what it is. But my concern is also that the LSAT, if they have a low LSAT and a really high GRE, they are both reported on the 509s now, but that LSAT is still going to affect the average or medium, however, I think it's medium LSAT score. So I talk to sources and I get anything from, well, of course they're going to be concerned about that, to that shouldn't matter. But when you think about US News, okay, and that's part of why I want to look at their methodology more. How much is the LSAT affecting their, how is this working now? Okay, with the LSAT, with the GRE, how does this affect a school's ranking? And how much is this, when it gets down to the nuts and bolts, affecting the use of the GRE? Because it's just also combined, and one thing can affect the other. And so that just is something that sort of sticks in my craw as far as looking at that whole process and analyzing that, and getting people to talk about that.
I think that you bring up a really good point, and that is the notion of minutia. And I feel like it's really important for us as law school communicators to understand that Christine is our minutia person. There's nobody else I feel out there who cares deeply about this level of detail that we do. And so I just think it's really important, and I am extraordinarily grateful to have you here and to be able to make this connection with you. And I hope we all are, because this is the trenches that we're in every day. And I think what you're articulating is really complicated, and what we're doing is also complicated. And so it's really great to be able to have you as a resource in caring about those kinds of things. And so I think it's just to put a fine point on how important that is. I remember Lee Jones was talking about wanting to do a story about admissions, and someone really pulling back the curtain and talking about the admissions pieces and what how officers make those decisions in this moment. And so I think that it inspires me and it's helpful for me to know. And I would love to, thinking about it, I'm thinking about like mental health. Like we have more people who need accommodations now than they ever had before. Perhaps that's something that would pique your interest, or at least those are the kinds of stories that we could share with you. And then you could have them for as you wish in your back pocket. There are a couple questions. Let me give you some of those. Are you interested in stories about faculty doing research or classes on newsy topics? For example, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and COVID. So, real-time responding of law schools to topics that are relevant in the world at this moment in time. Is that something that you would theoretically write about?
Possibly, as long as it's as long as I can tie it to legal ed enough. I get the things I do get in my inbox now are just things completely unreal. They're like grade school or elementary school or high school, or there's just not, if there's something that is in a law school that's relevant to legal education, then I would definitely want the chance to review that and discuss it with my editor. Every time I get a release or something that looks like could be a story, I shoot it over to him. And then he and I, it might be that I'm already feeling like it's a no, but I give him the last word, or that I know it's a yes. And then it might be a maybe. And then we might discuss it as far as, how we could work this in or not. So it's not even just my decision. I get his expertise, and he's been with the company like 13, 14 years. So he's a little newer to legal ed as well, but not as new as me. So, but yeah, I would say, and I like the word minutia, because I do tend to look at things. I'm a detail person and I love research. And so a lot of things really pretty early on from starting the job, I would just run by my boss and say, did you know this? Like, do people know this? And he'd be like, no. And I'm like, cool, because I didn't know it, but I didn't know who else didn't know it. So, so a lot of things like that. So they might even be more esoteric things. Yeah,
I think that's often the world we live in. We are getting close to being an hour up, which flew by so fast. I just wanted to ask you, could you please remind us when the full go-to report is going live? Did you say that was tomorrow from law.com?
Tomorrow is the last sneak peek.
Okay.
And the 14th it's going up.
Got it.
Yeah, this has been our legal week this week. So all our folks are in New York City doing all kinds of fun stuff, and probably not fun stuff, but because it's a big conference. So that's, it's fun. But yeah, so as I said, so tomorrow will be the schools 1 through 10. But if you look back, if you just go on our website, you'll see, I think it's started somewhere around the 7th or 8th, where there's a slideshow. So it's 10 schools at a time being released, and 1 to 10 will be tomorrow. And then the big drop is Monday, the 14th.
Okay, that is exciting. And I feel like that gives us a nice way to end. I will of course let you have the final word. If there's anything you'd like us to go away with, any messages that you want us to take back to our deans. I think we all are walking away with a lot of good advice on how to get you our stories, and hopefully fill your inbox with things that we're doing in legal education. But if there's anything else that you want to share that we have not covered, I'd love for you to have that opportunity.
I just want to thank you really so much for having me. This is amazing. I wish it could be live, but of course that would be difficult with everybody being all over the place. So that's one advantage of Zoom. But I just can't emphasize enough to be worried about inundating me as opposed to like holding back, because you just never know. As long as you can accept that, no, we can't cover this now or whatever, don't be afraid to send things, because I really feel like I need a lot more of that than what I'm getting. I have been surprised that between me and Zach, we come up with so many stories, and they have been rather all over the place as far as topics. And again, just being willing to be a source, so that I can, like, if it really is okay. And some deans have even, oh, here's my, text me. Okay, if you need me right away, text me. So give me that information, a dean or any administrator or anybody who's just connected with the law, whether you're in a school or not, to let me know the level of communication that is appropriate for you.
That's super helpful. And I think one thing you'll find about this community is that we really are supportive of one another. And so I think that you will find that we all really want law schools to shine. And we can all agree on that we all want good stories about legal education. And so we are all in the same boat on that. And so I would encourage all the folks on here who are not communications professionals, who are alumni and development folks, go tell your communications professionals that work within your colleges, your law schools, to contact Christine with all your news, and hopefully your stories will also be in her columns. I cannot thank you enough, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue, and hopefully you will join us at one of our annual meetings so you can meet all of us in person and come to our receptions and hang out and talk shop, because that's fun. Minutia, law school minutia.
Yes, that would be awesome.
What drives us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you everyone for coming, and my AALS friends at the top, Mary Ann and Brian and Alyssa and Stephanie and Robin and Colleen and Heather and Victoria. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.